Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. It is not a Sunday. I mean, that was New Year's Day, and then there's a holiday, and Berm and I were traveling back from Atlanta. So it doesn't matter. We're just going to get into the difference, whatever day it is. This will be a Tuesday morning edition of the podcast daily, and we are going to catch up, and we're going to talk about Georgia 42, Ohio State 41 with former Buckeye star Anthony Schlegel. Schlegs, Happy New Year, first of all. Could have been happier if instead of the ball dropping to the left of the uprights, it had gone through at midnight on Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt. I was watching it. We were down here in Florida and, having a little party across the street. And I'm like watching the game and they want to watch the ball drop. So I'm like, hey, I'll be back. I got to go over to my house and watch this transpire. And literally as the ball was dropping and we were ringing in the new year, the Buckeyes lost. And I was just like, oh, no, my youngest son did not come back out. He was just devastated.
Yeah.
So, but you know what though, man, that was a great ball game.
Yeah. I mean,
you were there. Tell me about the atmosphere. How was it?
It was electric. Berm and I were there all week, and it was like, you knew there were going to be a ton of Georgia fans, and you're there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There still wasn't that big game feel. It was kind of weird. But by Thursday, Friday, a lot of Scarlet and Gray were showing up. Ohio State fans did their best to neutralize the crowd. You couldn't do that fully considering the game was in Atlanta. But Ohio State was confident. Ryan Day, walked in sort of talking trash to Berm and I thought, well, maybe we're going to see something special because they were tired of people saying they had no chance to win the game. There were people that were literally writing and saying in the media, Ohio State cannot beat Georgia. Really? The spread was 6.5 and getting lower. They're the two most talented teams. Like, there's a difference between cannot and will not. I've said that in a bunch of other shows, how frustrating that was just for me to hear that about Ohio State because I didn't think it was accurate. But, the best version of Ohio State did show up in that game. And sometimes that's still not enough. But they proved without a doubt in my mind, like they were not intimidated by the stage. They were not intimidated by Georgia. They felt like they belonged. And then they wound up, one play short or one call short or however you want to put it. But the Buckeyes should not be hanging their heads about that. Sometimes you just lose.
Yeah. Just looking at that game and you said the Buckeyes gave their best and you're talking about people talking about how Ohio State can't beat Georgia. I mean, this was very similar to 14 going against Alabama when everybody was like, Alabama's going to roll Ohio State. Now, the difference was we were coming in off of, a really solid Big Ten championship win of 59-0 versus Wisconsin, as opposed to a loss versus Michigan, and the way we lost versus Michigan. I'll tell you this, man, that was the most animated and fired up I've ever seen Ryan Day. I mean, those guys were ready to play in that game, and you could see it from the jump. And we were all saying that if Ohio State was going to be able to win this football game, they had to start out fast. And they did that. I mean, offensively, we could just all positive talk. The offense played phenomenal. I mean, they were outstanding. And, I keep reading the things about, wide receiver, these numbers of wide receivers and stuff. Like, you can't count Jackson Smith and Jigba because he really wasn't there all season. Mm-hmm. But yes, but he should have been, right? So you have your number one guy. You have a Marvin Harrison who is a bona fide number one, whatever he wants to be. He's an absolute stud. That whole sequence of events that knocked him out of the game, that was a huge turning point in the ball game because it was kind of similar to when I was watching the Michigan game in the stands around fans. And at that point, they were like, just throw it up to Marvin Harrison. I'm like, that's a phenomenal take, everybody, because the guy can do everything. Yeah. And you kind of saw that, which was it was really special when you have quarterbacks and receiver group that also goes into, Brian Hartline and teaching those guys that next man up mentality, but just the same, being on the same page and, CJ rolling to his right and like basically pointing. And that was kind of like glimpses of a couple years ago, even with Justin Fields and the wide receivers then. It was very fun to watch. It was fun to watch him play offensively a complete 4-quarter game. That was by far C.J. Stroud's best game that I've ever seen him play. I even tweeted at one time, like, I see you, CJ, like he ran the football. And he was doing everything that he needed to do to win the football game that we've all wanted all year long. And he did it in the biggest game of the year at that point versus Georgia. I was really, really proud of his performance. And yeah, you know, he put us in an opportunity to win the football game from offensive side.
I think I'm going to say the unfortunate part, but anyone can describe it however they want. All this talk about CJ Stroud and his legacy and not winning in the rivalry, not winning the Big Ten, and now his chance to change all that with the national championship, not going to get that. It's not his fault. Like the Oregon game last year, not his fault. The loss in Ann Arbor, not his fault. That's sort of the fallacy, I think, at times of assigning win-loss records to quarterbacks. Obviously, there is a hole on CJ Stroud's resume, but Saturday night was a prime example of a special player doing everything he possibly could, and it wasn't enough to offset, late touchdowns and a missed field goal, or, Marvin Harrison getting knocked out cold with something that should have been called targeting. Maybe that drive ends differently. Who knows?
Well, it drive ends differently. 100% it does, because it should have been targeting and they would have been first and goal. It changed the dynamic, because if they score, I think, were they up 11 at that point?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, even if you get a field goal, now you're up 4. I don't remember the sequence.
Yeah.
Maybe they did kick it. They
got the field goal. Yeah.
Yeah. They got the field goal. But still, I mean, that does change the dynamic, because then you have an opportunity of punching it in. And you're right, though. Like, as far as the Ohio State quarterback goes, you kind of judge based on your wins and losses versus Michigan. Right. So that is the gap. But that being said, hell of a player and a great young man, and somebody that's going to represent Ohio State in the future in the NFL. And he came up short. And the one thing that he said that resonated with me was when he said, I definitely think we should have won the game. This was done by 11 Warriors. Coach Day did a hell of a job. He keeps showing up. And, he just basically quoted a man in the arena, and I wouldn't rather play with or for anyone else. And that kind of bodes. That's kind of where we're in this recruiting cycle as well, right? I mean, you're going to go, like Ryan Day's not going anywhere. You want to go play for a guy like Ryan Day. And he coached that way too. Like that was, a game where he tried to go for it on fourth down a couple of times. The one they had the illegal procedure because he was moving toward the line of scrimmage, and you can't do that. And that was a good call.
Yep.
On the offense, right? They ran like a little toss sweep out to the side, and he was able to gain the edge, because we have said multiple times, like, stop throwing the bubble screen, but still, how can you get to the edge? Well, he motioned him in to block it, right? Yeah. So you condense the blocks to then expand it. I like that call. But he definitely was going to try to win the game. And he was not hesitant. He was not very reserved. And so when you have your best player on your team talking about, hey, regardless, I want to play for this man, hopefully that resonates with recruits out there, regardless of the NIL situation, which in and of itself is just absolutely stupid right now.
Yeah. I think the other part of that, Schlegs, is that I hope that it resonates with Ryan Day in the respect that he has to be himself. And I've said this in other places, so but it's worth having, I think, this conversation more with you, because you have been not just a player, but also on the coaching side. Like, I think that he spent the whole year trying to prove he could do it differently, and trying to prove a point to Jim Harbaugh, who needled him. And I think Ryan Day just stopped doing the things that made him a great coach, made him the choice to lead Ohio State. And he came back in, I think, that second opportunity, the mulligan, the new lease on life. Like, he went back to being aggressive and showing personality, cheering on the sideline, and doing and taking chances that, frankly, up until November 26th, he wasn't doing any of that. And maybe that's not the reason, but it sure seemed like it. And he came back out, and it was like, I'm going to be myself. And if he does that moving forward, my goodness, I mean, they're going to be right back in playing for championships again, because that's who they need him to be.
Yeah, I don't know the why, or even if that was, or if you could even say that actually happened. I would say this, just taking from a look of even that Michigan game, I thought they played very hesitant. I thought they played with more of a fear, right, of losing, as opposed to I'm ultra confident, I'm the Ohio State University, and we're going to go win the game, as opposed to I just don't want to do things that lose us the game.
Right.
It's a very, very different mindset. And I know that just those coaches in that building, like you didn't see that at all against Georgia. And I think moving forward, and that's the unique thing, all of us, right? Everybody has something to prove, right? Mickey Marotti said it all the time. You'll never improve unless you have something to prove. And he has something to prove, but it's going back to who you are and being authentically you. And I think that's why guys want to coach for him. I think that's why guys want to play for him. And when you have a guy that could potentially be the number 1 overall pick says, like, this is my guy, I want to ride with him. And he shows up every day and does his work and he cares about them individually and their growth. Like, that's who Ryan Day is to me. He's a family man. He loves his kids. He loves the coaches that are on his staff. He loves his players, and he just ultimately wants to win and wants to have them to have success as well. And I think that's what you saw. And the beauty is in coaching, just like in playing, everybody is uniquely different. I played with AJ Hawk, who didn't say a word to anybody, but just was an absolute freak. And you play with Bobby Carpenter, and you play with Dante Whitner, and you play with all these Troy Smith. All these guys have their own authentic, unique personality that make them who they are. That's why the beauty of football is what it is. It's taking all those different personalities and putting them together and having 11 people on the field to go win. And so the more that you can be just authentically you and what you stand for as a coach, but then ultimately as a team and an organization, that's how you're going to have success in embodying that. And then most importantly, moving forward, finding those recruits and those people that believe in what you do to be on your roster, right? Because the one thing Ohio State has always had, I would say, Whittress early, and then really with, Mark Pantoni and Urban, and now Ryan Day and Mark still on staff, it's the ability to recruit that talent. And in the game of college football, just like the NFL, talent wins games. And you got to have that moving forward. So I think he's somebody that will resonate with the recruits moving forward. Just, I want to go play for that guy, period.
Okay. The defense, Schlegs. What do we think?
Somebody, I think it was Jay Book. I don't know. He had a good little take on a snapshot of the 2 games at the end of the year that mattered the most. And our defense gave up 87 points, over 1,000 yards, 38 points in the fourth quarter. That's bumpy. The big plays, we talked about it numerous times on here. The defense, you just can't give up the home runs. And the guys, there was a couple of times where there was a home run to be had. I remember early in the game, Stetson Bennett kept it going to his right, where if he would have handed the ball off, it would have been 60 yards to the house, if not more. I don't remember exactly the play, but that was a run fit, and there wasn't anybody back there to make a tackle. So the run fit situation, the sending of the edge, the run fits, some of the eye discipline, like the things that we saw previously that we thought were going to be corrected weren't necessarily corrected. I thought the DBs played better as the game went on. But then you go into, and I remember there's one play with Tommy. That's a difficult play. That was probably, just looking at why you would see a Mike linebacker running with a 3 vert. That normally is Tampa 2, and you have the inside 3 guy. Now, I don't remember if they motioned that guy in, because what you do when teams play Tampa 2, and the weakness of Tampa 2 is deep in the middle, and most of the time that's going to be a Mike on somebody. Well, you play that when you have like a tight end or somebody in the 3, but you counter that by motioning wide receiver in. And so that new wide receiver becomes the new number 3, and you have a Mike that has to run with that. Normally you could check out of it, or it's like, hey, you just got to drop to 10 yards and just keep it in front of you. Yeah. But you can't say that's on time. That's on Tommy. That's not. That's on the call, right? And then you go look at the one play on defense that really hurt the most was the 70-yard touchdown pass, playing man free. There's nobody there, but it's more of the situation, right? The situation of the game. You're up 11. I think it's 9 minutes in the game. You've been playing zone, and that's also the journey of a team and knowing your personnel. It's different when you have guys that are across the board that you trust to can play man all day long.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. But if you don't necessarily have those guys and you're better suited to play zone, you got to go play zone, and sprinkle in a little bit of man when the situation arises. P and 10 means first play of a drive. P and 10, 9 minutes to go, make them earn everything and chew up as much clock as possible, right? Because you're still going to be up 4. If they don't go for 2, you're still going to be up a field goal with less time on the clock. So keep everything in front of you. That one particular play call was the one that was the most disheartening. I mean, you look at the Rushman and the amount of sacks. How many sacks did we end up having in that game?
2.
All right, 2.
Yeah, I think.
So that was the first time that they had pressures. Yeah.
Well, there were opportunities. Like, I think what I say 2, and that it seems like it's not a great amount. Like, Stetson Bennett hadn't been sacked since like before Halloween, and I think the other thing that I was impressed by Schlegel in this game, like I thought Larry Johnson did a great job. If I'm going to be critical, you can praise a good job as well. You should, to be balanced. The Rushmen were really disciplined. They were not letting Stetson Bennett run loose, and they were staying in their lanes. They were turning them back inside. And Stetson Bennett, you could tell there were a lot of times he was unsure of where to go because Ohio State wasn't giving the same opportunities, the escape hatches that they had earlier in the year. I don't know what you're going to say, but I wanted to throw that.
You're absolutely right. It was the guys on the edge, right? Because I mean, obviously he's an athletic guy that can just go pick up yardage and move the chains. And when he did try to roll, there was somebody already there on the edge, right? So regardless if they ran like an end in and a tackle around, like the guy was there, or if they came up and they ran just 2 tackle stunts in the front, the edge rushers were there. So he had to step up, and that's where they came. And they had some good coverage in the back end that led to a couple of those sacks when he was holding the ball. So I'm with you. I thought they did a really good job. The thing that was a little bit disheartening from it to me all year has been just the run fits, right? Knowing where my fit is and being able to play fast. Because when you play one back offenses, it's very simple. There's one back and there's one gap. Like that's your rule. So what gap do I have? Who's filling it? And then if they do get past that, you can't, again, create vertical seams because that's when a guy gets in and then he just bounces it outside. You have to build that wall. But if he does slip, who's the next guy to make the tackle? Well, that normally is where there's a safety that's also there. So that being said, that issue not being cleared up over, and we've seen it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, that's something that never got fixed. Now, is that an understanding of the defense? I don't know, but this is where, Ryan and his staff, it has to get brutally honest, because again, players play, coaches coach, right? I mean, that's what you do. So why, sit down, go through the game. Why did you, and he's going to do a self audit offensively. They're going to do a year-round audit of what they did. Mm-hmm. But the same thing goes because you are the head football coach of doing it on the defensive side of the ball. And why did we call this play here? Like, what was the thought process? Mm-hmm. Because ultimately it all goes back to him as the head coach.
Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't matter if you're the CEO of a business, it's all the same. Like everybody does the year-end audit and a review of what you did great in 2022 so you can, and what you did poorly in 22 so that you can have a great 23. Those are the difficult conversations that have to be had, because if they don't get addressed now, you're going to see the same thing going into 23, and you can't have that happen.
Yeah, and there's a part that you mentioned in there, Schlegs, that there's just no way to really know the answer to, which is comfort in the scheme, knowledge of the scheme. This was year one with Jim Knowles, so the snapshot of the last 2 games, we can see it, and it's a clear-cut business, like the evaluation process, and that's what someone you used to work for, Urban Meyer, would say: is it thumbs up or thumbs down? There's no gray. Yes, like we know that the last 2 games defensively, you'd have to say are thumbs down. The arrow over the course of if you look at the full body of work, it's better than it was the previous 2 years. You could see that there is, some growth there from that Jim Knowles provided. It didn't matter in the end of the year. We know that. But so how does that translate for 2023? How much better will the players that are returning? Steel Chambers has already said he's coming back. The expectation is that Tommy Eichenberg will. There's going to be some players that you have to be replaced. Ronnie Hickman will be gone. Cameron Brown will be gone. I think Lathan
Jack
Ransom
Harrison will be gone.
Returning. Yeah, so like Teron Vincent, but there is a good nucleus of guys who have been in the system returning, and Jim Knowles is going to have another full year or 9 months until they play Indiana. It took him 3-4 years at Oklahoma State before they became number 3 in the country. Now, I know that the counter argument is he has way more talent available at Ohio State. That is also true. But generally, you don't see instant perfect turnaround because like coaching is hard and knowing the system is hard and figuring out your personnel is hard. I know that sucks because this team was close enough to winning a national title on Saturday night, because there's no doubt that they would have beat TCU next week in my mind. But, that'll be the tough part, like how close they were to just say, well, 2023 is going to be better. That probably nobody wants to hear that part. But anyway,
well, you don't know. You do know because, again, football is business and business is football. It's all the same. And in order to get better, you got to have really hard conversations and a self-introspection as to what did you do that didn't allow you to reach the ultimate goal, which is winning a national championship. Yeah. First off, the Michigan game is one. I would say this. I felt worse after the Michigan game than I did this loss today or, a couple days ago. Yeah. It hurt me because I thought they were there. And it's like, man, I wish I would have saw that team in the shoe against Michigan after Thanksgiving, because I think it would have been a completely different ball game. Mm-hmm. That being said, in strength conditioning, you go back and you look at what are the weaknesses of our team? Like, what do we have to improve on? Is it strength? Is it speed? Is it power? Is it mobility? Like, and then every individual player in and of themselves is all different. So you have to continue to train your weaknesses. And what are those weaknesses on defense? What are those weaknesses on offense? What are those weaknesses on special teams? Because there was weaknesses on special teams too. Like, you can't have 12 guys on the field. Like, you have to be able to execute certain things that we saw earlier in the year that you didn't execute. Like, all those go back into this, again, 2022 audit of the Ohio State University Buckeyes. That is what it is. So in order for you to make gains, and this, I will say this too, and after the game, there's a lot of people that are out there calling for people's job. Like, first off, that's wrong, because just think about this, if you make those changes, right, that's just another system and another beginning. Like, you don't want to. I'd say the one thing in college football that people have lost sight of is why Tress was so good for so long and Urban was so good for so long is that you had some continuity. Tress, especially in his staff, like, guys didn't go out. Now, if you are the Nick Sabans and the Urban Meyers of the world, like, that you're going to have constant turnover, but it is you that are bringing these people in to run what it is that you want to do. But that nucleus of people are always there, and the foundation is always there. It's why it's so critical that Mickey is still always there, because exactly what you're getting from a strength and conditioning perspective. That doesn't mean that you stop growing. It doesn't mean that you stop learning and trying to be better. Mm-hmm. Every single year. That is what your job is, regardless of profession, right? If you think the status quo is the status quo, you're going to get passed regardless if you're Ohio State or somebody else. So those are all things that they have to adjust to. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you got to be better. So what are the things that we have to do to be better? And I think that you have a great nucleus of young players there. You know who's coming back offensively. Everybody in the running back room is back. Everybody in the wide receiver room is back. The tight ends are back. You're going to have some change up on the offensive line, but you've recruited at a very high level. So hopefully those guys are developed and ready to step into that role. Defensively, your two linebackers are coming back. They're the ones that are calling the defense. And I tell you what, man, Steele, like, the linebackers run, they pursue, they hit. I was super proud of the way that Tommy and Steele played this year as a former linebacker. Mm-hmm. I really do like some of the secondary positions, but we do have to get better, and you have to continue to get better up front. So there's room to grow. What they are right now, I can't just say I'm going to give you a snapshot of it, because you know what? I'm not in it on a day-to-day basis. Right. But, the good thing is that you're Ohio State, you're in the college football playoffs. You got beat by 1 point against, again, a 13-0 Georgia team. guys. I mean, the team has been successful for the past 2 years for a reason, and you had to go out there and take it from them, and you didn't. And even going into the last kick, when we went to it, I was like automatic because Noah has been fantastic all year. He missed that one.
Yep.
So, but again, you go back and like there were other opportunities to where it shouldn't even been put on his plate to be in that situation. And again, as a player and coach, like you got to go back and look at those things before you pass judgment. Should he have made it 100%? Does he have the leg capable of doing it? Absolutely. He didn't. Competitive excellence. It is what it is. But there were other things in that game that wouldn't have even put him in that situation to have to make that kick. I'm not bailing him out. He's not bailing himself out. He knows that he missed the kick. But ultimately, there was a lot of other things in that game that transpired. The calls, and that's the other thing too. Like, you don't ever want to leave it up into the ref's hand. I learned this very early from wrestling, and this was the beauty of wrestling, right? My dad said, never leave it in his hands. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go out there and just try to physically blunten this guy to where I make him tap out, right? And it's not going to be up to the ref to call whether or not that was, a tilt or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to go out there and do it. They had those opportunities in that game, and they didn't capitalize. So, and that's what leads to a 1-point loss.
Well, I think we'll probably have a lot more time to talk about that with the podcast and the difference and everybody. We're planning to have everyone out there in LA so that we could work on a game. And we were pretty close to having that, but we're going to do it anyway. And we're going to go out there and we're going to maybe get bumpy and have some beverages and turn on a camera and talk about the 2022 season with Schlegs and Bobby and Zach and Jay-Z and Berm and I. So there's going to be some conversation and some good food and then maybe some football at the end of it. And we'll get into a lot more of that together. I might just turn those 4 loose. They don't even need me to run the show from now. I'll just turn on the camera and let those guys talk ball. But this will be the appetizer for that. Getting Schlegs with a little of the difference in the podcast for a Tuesday morning of the daily. Does that sound all right with you, bud?
It sounds great, man. And I'll tell you what, guys, I mean, if you're a Buckeye fan, I mean, I know this is not the outcome that we wanted, but I feel really good. I feel really good about our coaches. And the beautiful thing I say that is because I think they're going to have the hard conversations that are necessary for growth for this next year. And I think they're going to be ultra juiced. I know our guys are after tasting this defeat, because I remember what happened in the Orange Bowl in 2013 when we got absolutely dominated. And then we came back the next year and won a national championship. And I remember very vividly everything that went into that year to make that happen. And I have ultimate confidence that our coaches will be able to get it done. I think our guys understand what is required to make that happen. And guess what, man? It's starting back up in a couple of weeks. So they're just like, but I'll put it this way. Marvin Harrison Jr., and here's the other thing too, guys, that sometimes I think we just got to go back and sit back and appreciate some of the things that we're able to witness as fans that I think sometimes get overshadowed after a devastating loss like this. And when we needed his best, C.J. Stroud gave us his best.
Yep.
Okay. Marvin Harrison's work ethic, it's unbelievable. And let me tell you something, guys, other guys see that. And if they don't want to come to Ohio State and they're a recruit for some reason and it's NIL, guess what? Don't be a Buckeye. I'm kind of over the whole NIL thing because I think it's absolutely stupid to pay kids to come there when they haven't played. NIL was meant to, as guys that were there and were playing, to be able to, generate income on their name, image, and likeness. Earn it, right? That was kind of the point, as opposed to going to a place. But still, here's the other thing too. My value proposition to those guys would be, all right, yeah, you can make $1 million. And again, how is that paid out? We don't even know how these contracts are being written. Okay. But that being said, hey, do you want to make $1 million now? Or do you want to make $18 million with a signing bonus of being a first-round draft pick coming out of The Ohio State University? Oh, and how do we know? Look at the league. Look at what we produced. Here's our guys, right?
Yep.
Our coaches are there. They want to develop in you. They want to develop you. We have a strength conditioning program that will develop you. all those different things. And most importantly, Buckeye Nation and what it means to actually be a Buckeye. I'm from Texas, right? But I'm a Buckeye through and through. So those are the people that we want in the building. And if they're not there, if they want something else, guess what? That's when you say go Bucks and just let them on their way, because you're going to find the people that we want in the program. So that being said, Marvin Harrison's work ethic has a trickle down effect. Guys like that, guys like Steele and the bond that Steele and Tommy and Cade and those guys all have together, like that's a difference maker, man. Like guys are going to see that and they're going to want to work and they're going to want to go spend the extra time working on their craft, regardless of what it is in the offseason, to have the type of 2023 year that they want. So Marvin Harrison, absolutely. And Buka Stan, like difference makers, man. They're going to have great years next year. I'm excited to watch that. And I'll tell you what, Ryan Day is a difference maker. The way he coached in this game, that's a difference maker. Right. So I'm excited for what that's going to look like in 2023. It stinks that we have 9 months that we have to wait for that to happen. I would like just to give them a reprieve of a month to catch their breath and let's go do it again. But now it's Mick and his staff's turn. And then Nico just got the head strength job at University of Cincinnati. You see that, Kevin Wilson's now at Tulsa. Like, you're going to have some gaps that got to be filled in those areas. I'm excited to see who they bring in.
I think there might be another one. Quinn Barham might be on the.
Oh, really? There you go, Quinn.
Not trying to break it. Not trying to break any news on the show.
But you know what though? Like those are great dudes that deserve the opportunity. And the thing is, like, when they go to those programs, they're going to put their own stamp on it. But a lot of it has been influenced by what they learned at the Ohio State. It is the best of the best. It is the best of the best. It's not the NFL where you have 17 weeks and 3 preseason games and it's just constant turnover and those things like that. It's college football at its finest and what we love all about it. I mean, you have guys there for 3 years. They have the nucleus, like when we get together with Zach and Jay-Z and Bob and then AJ's down there with Mac, like, you all come together. We all got kids. We're in each other's lives. Like, that's the beauty of college football that you don't necessarily get in the NFL. Yeah. And we can't lose sight of what that is and rooting for these guys as they're 18 to 22-year-olds. Now, Stetson Bennett, he's 25. He took my route. Okay. He's a different ballgame. But like that's what makes it fun. Let's not lose sight of that. So I hope that everybody has a great 2023, be a difference maker in the lives of people around you. And I look forward to our little podcast at the National Championship. It's going to be fun. And I will have to go do some self-introspection on the Buckeyes so I can be prepared for that one.
Big week of preparation before. We're not going to be working all that hard.
Yeah,
to be honest,
no doubt. Maybe we'll just have some by the pool and just set up some microphones and just do it.
Just
there.
talk shop. But you better be careful, Schlegs, talking about these strength coaches leaving Ohio State, because everyone's going to be banging down your door begging for you to come back and get into the Woody and make it bumpy in there. You got to be careful.
I mean, it's 74 degrees right now in Florida, guys. No, I'm just kidding.
It's going to be nice in LA too. We're going to, I had to put him, just because everyone's going to ask. I'm just going to tease him because he's here. I know that he's got a good setup going for his life and his kids out there. And we're going to talk about that too when we're out in Cali. So the podcast, The Difference, all that's coming out. We're going to be out in California and we're going to talk to Schlegs a lot, get his thoughts. He's going to do his homework, and then we're going to hang out with the rest of the crew. As he said, Happy New Year to all of you. Happy New Year to Schlegs. I appreciate you taking time throughout this whole year. We'll do as much as we can for 2023 as well, because I always appreciate your thoughts and your knowledge and your motivation. So for Schlegs, I am Austin. This has been the podcast brought to you by The Difference. It's a podcast daily. We'll see you next time.